very specifically, Israel has begun launching what I would consider incredible acts of war against the country of Lebanon. Now, if you ask the Israelis or you ask the Pentagon, they're going to tell you, well, it's, they're striking Hezbollah targets. They're waging war against Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is embedded across Lebanon and is also a major political party in Lebanon. So the distinction is incredibly loosey-goosey. And, well, it's not great. But before we get right into it, we had a bunch of people earlier today from the Needle Drop raid-in. If you're still here, hello, raiders. But also have to give a shout out. Have to give a shout out to the Needle Drop here for drawing my attention to this. There is, as of 3 days ago, there is an Israeli-Palestinian pop group that is launching, and Fantano identifies it as a psyop, and I literally cannot. There's literally no other explanation for it that exists. Their first single is called "All Eyes on Us," which just makes my skin crawl. Here's 30 seconds. Yeah, there's something weird going on here. There's something so weird. The song that they're putting out there is about, we're not going anywhere until we're finished. All eyes are on us. Like, the messaging in the lyrics of the song is very weird and uncomfortable. Yeah, don't look at our war crimes. Look at these attractive pop boys. Yeah, it's very weird. It's very weird, and it makes my skin crawl. It feels like when a corporate account starts memeing at you specifically. You know what I mean? Oh, God. Yeah. It is, yeah. Weird stuff, but all of that is to distract. It's to distract you, okay? It's to distract you. And we're gonna get to the bombings in particular in this story, but first I wanted to open up with Benjamin Netanyahu came to the United States yesterday to give a speech to the UN, and he was met with a lot of protests. Just a quick little. Like, please, more of this. More of this. Like, this is good stuff. We should be protesting Netanyahu more. Now, the cops did wind up cracking down quite hard on these protesters. A lot of just over the top police violence, but that's nothing new, I guess. let's take a look at Benjamin Netanyahu's address to the UN. We're gonna jump into that before we get into some of the specifics of what they've been doing today since this speech. But a lot of this story starts here, so we have to start here too.
I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan.
Oh, also, some important context here. Right before Netanyahu gave his speech, this happened.
I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Just a mass walkout of nations in protest of Netanyahu's address.
Order, please. Ladies and gentlemen, order.
You know, this number of people represents, like, maybe 24 nations walking out.
Order, please.
Like, in terms of UN protests, this is up there. You know? Has anyone written a handbook on how to equip yourself for a protest that might get ugly? I would recommend you reach out to B, or B, one of our moderators on the Discord. They have a lot of really good advice for how to equip yourself for a protest. Yeah. Anyway, a walkout protest at the UN. And honestly, having seen only clips of this speech, entirely warranted.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of the State of Israel. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Also, chat, I understand that this story is going to get pretty heated. No Fed posting allowed in my chat, please.
Order, please. Ladies and gentlemen, order.
Like, look at how many people get up and leave. It's great. Let him give a speech to an empty room.
Order, please.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't intend to come here this year. My country is at war, fighting for its life. But after I heard the lies and slanders leveled at my country by many of the speakers at this podium, I decided to come here and set the record straight.
The amount I despise this man is really hard for me to articulate.
I decided to come here to speak for my people, to speak for my country, to speak for the truth. And here's the truth. Israel seeks peace. Israel yearns for.
It is, okay, just real quick, just a little bit of pulling the curtain aside here. Immediately after this, he went and ordered the airstrikes on Lebanon, on the capital of Lebanon. The gall to give a speech where he's opens it by saying Israel seeks peace and then immediately leaving to go order an airstrike on the capital of a neighboring country. That is, I mean, that is like Hitlerite shit. We seek peace through strength.
For peace. Israel has made peace and will make peace again. Yet we face savage enemies who seek our annihilation, and we must defend ourselves against these savage murderers. Our enemies seek...
Like, notice how he even co-opts the language of, like, colonial movements? Oh yeah, our enemies are savages. Like, what? Next sentence, are you going to be talking about how they're like, doing, I don't know, scalping? Like, what? Like, he's just reappropriating the same language that has been used to justify atrocity after atrocity for the last several hundred years.
Not only to destroy us, they seek to destroy our common civilization and return all of us to a dark age of tyranny and terror.
Yes, so therefore anything and everything we do to them is justified.
When I spoke here last year,
like our enemy is both strong and weak rhetoric that is the hallmark of fascist language. You know, our enemies are savage, barbaric, uncivilized. You know, they aren't clever, but they possess a sort of dull shrewdness to them. And they would seek to bring us back to an uncivilized age of chaos. Like, this is like the kind of monologue you would get in a Final Fantasy game by the villain.
I said we faced the same timeless choice that Moses put before the people of Israel thousands of years ago. As we were about to enter the Promised Land, Moses told us that our actions will determine whether we bequeath to future generations a blessing or a curse. And that is the choice we face today. The curse of Iran's unremitting aggression, or the blessing of a historic reconciliation between Arab and Jew. In the days that followed that speech, the blessing I spoke of came into sharper focus. A normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel seemed closer than ever. But then came the curse of October 7th. Thousands of Iranian-backed Hamas terrorists from Gaza burst into Israel in pickup trucks, on motorcycles, and they committed unimaginable atrocities. They savagely murdered 1,200 people. They raped and mutilated women. They beheaded men. They burned babies alive. They burnt entire families alive, babies, children.
You know, this would be much more effective rhetoric if he hadn't ordered Israel's military to go and do that 1,000 times over to Gaza. You know, like, you guys know that you're doing all of those same things, right? Just on a much larger scale to the people in Gaza. Like, it really undermines this rhetoric you're trying to employ here.
Parents, grandparents, in scenes reminiscent of the Nazi Holocaust. Hamas...
Which, by the way, in case you aren't familiar with Benjamin Netanyahu, he's a Holocaust revisionist. He thinks Hitler is not to blame for the Holocaust. He actually blames the Muslims in the Middle East for pressuring Hitler to do a Holocaust. Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Malachite. He actually he says that I think the Grand Mufti of in Palestine, like, basically convinced Hitler to do the Holocaust. Yeah, this is from 2015. Benjamin Netanyahu blames the Holocaust on the Palestinian Mufti. That's ludicrous. Yeah. In a speech on Tuesday to the Zionist Congress, blamed the Palestinian Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini, for the Holocaust. According to Netanyahu, the Grand Mufti, whose title means he was the senior Sunni Muslim religious leader in the city, convinced Hitler to launch a campaign of extermination when the two men met in November of 1941. Quote, Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews, Netanyahu said. And Haj Amin al-Husseini went to Hitler and said, if you expel them, they'll come back here to Palestine. In Netanyahu's history, Hitler then asked, what should I do with them? Al-Husseini replied, burn them. So, yeah, no. In case you didn't know, what makes, like, Benjamin Netanyahu invoking the Holocaust a little bit more fucked up? He's literally a Holocaust revisionist.
Kidnapped 251 people from dozens of different countries, dragging them into the dungeons of Gaza. Israel has brought home 154 of these hostages, including
by the way, no evidence of his claims, but that is a position he's been consistent on for a long time. It is ahistorical, and frankly, I would call it, like, in a sense, Holocaust denial.
117 who returned alive. I want to assure you, we will not rest until the remaining hostages are brought home too. And some of their family members are here with us today. I ask you to stand up.
Like, he literally brought people as props to the UN, and he's the one getting hostages killed. There was a ceasefire deal on the table that he personally sunk back in, like, June or July of this year. So many more hostages have died since then. And he's directly responsible.
With us is Eli Stevie, whose son Idan was abducted from the Nova Music Festival. That was his crime. A music festival. And these murderous monsters took him. Kobe Smirno, whose son Jonathan was murdered, and his corpse was taken into the dungeons, into the terror tunnels of Gaza. A corpse held hostage. Salim al-Atrash, whose brother Muhammad, a brave Arab Israeli soldier, was murdered. His body too was taken to Gaza. And so was the body of Ifat Hyman's daughter Inbar, who was brutally murdered at that same music festival. With us is Sharon Sharabi, whose brother Yossi was murdered, and who prays for his older brother Eli, who is still held hostage in Gaza. And with us too is Izhar Lifsich from Kibbutz Nir Oz, a kibbutz that was wiped out by the terrorists. Thankfully, we achieved the release of his mother Yocheved, but his father Oded is still languishing in an underground terrorist hell of Hamas. I again promise you, we will return your loved ones home. We will not spare that effort until this.
Except, of course, unless we kill them, which is something we have done not multiple times now.
This holy mission is accomplished. Ladies and gentlemen, the curse of October 7th began when Hamas invaded Israel from Gaza. But it didn't end there. Israel was soon forced to defend itself on 6 more war fronts organized by Iran. On October 8th, Hezbollah attacked us from Lebanon. Since then, they fired over 8,000 rockets at our towns and cities, at our civilians, at our children. 2 weeks later, the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen launched drones and missiles at Israel, the first of 250 such attacks, including one yesterday aimed at Tel Aviv. Iran's Shiite militias in Syria and Iraq have targeted Israel dozens of times over the past year as well. Fueled by Iran, Palestinian terrorists in Judea and Samaria perpetrated scores of attacks there and throughout Israel. And last April, for the first time ever, Iran directly attacked Israel from its own territory, firing 300 drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles at us. I have a message for the tyrants of Tehran. If you strike us, we will strike you. There is no place. There is no.
I mean, can we just pause for a moment? Like, you did just carry out like 2 high-profile assassinations in Iranian territory. You know, like, the amount of like, we can hit you, but you can't hit us, that goes on here is frankly astonishingly insane.
Place in Iran that the long arm of Israel cannot reach, and that's true of the entire Middle East. Far from being lambs led.
Like what he's saying here is essentially that Israel is laying claim to the entirety of the Middle East. That is, they are laying claim to that entire sphere of influence.
To the slaughter, Israel's soldiers have fought back with incredible courage and with heroic sacrifice. And I have another message for this assembly and for the world outside this hall. We are winning.
Yeah, that's not what it looks like. You have an army of like over 500,000 people, and you haven't been able to take out Hamas in a year of fighting. Like, that is not a successful military operation, okay? Like, they had like 5,000 guys. You outnumbered them 100 to 1. And you haven't been able to defeat them.
Ladies and gentlemen, as Israel defends itself against Iran in the seven-front war, the line separating the blessing and the curse could not be more clear. This is the map I presented.
Oh my God, he brought props. He brought props.
Here last year. It's a map of a blessing. It shows Israel and its Arab partners forming a land bridge connecting Asia and Europe between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. Across this bridge, we will lay rail lines, energy pipelines, fiber optic cables, and this will serve the betterment of 2 billion people.
Why are you giving a pitch for essentially a multinational, like, infrastructure project while addressing the UN about not that? You're like, look at all of the economic activity we could produce. Look at all of the international trade we could do. Now, frankly, this is what international capital interests care about. Don't get me wrong. But like, this is such a weird turn from, you know, we will win. We will bring the hostages home. We will fight terrorism. Yeah, no, but like that's it, Lee Kestner. It feels like not necessarily a bribe, but like, look, things would be so much better if you just let us be. Just turn your eyes away, avert your gaze, for a little while, and we'll have this wonderful new infrastructure project.
Now look at this second map. It's a map.
It is funny that he brought it up upside down first. But real quick, I also want to note something here. And I want to check this real quick. Yeah. Why is Israel not included in the blessing? I just wanted to check here. But like the arrow goes through Israel right here, right? Like why is it not in green? And my answer to that is because this is the reason it's not included here is because it's supposed to point out, see Egypt, see Saudi Arabia, see Sudan. These are what you'd get if you just ignore what's happening over here. Don't pay too much attention. Why? In India, see how much you stand to benefit from this?
The betterment of 2 billion people. Now look at this second map. It's a map. Look at the second map. It's a map.
You can tell it's an evil map because it has black on it.
Of a curse. It's a map of an arc of terror that Iran has created and imposed from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. Iran's malignant arc has shut down international waterways. It cuts off trade.
Also, does Israel deny that like the Houthis control Yemen? I mean, I guess there are still pockets of Yemen that the Houthis don't control, but they control like basically all of Yemen at this point. But the map makes the distinction between the two, so all right.
It destroys millions, destroys nations from within, and inflicts misery on millions. On the one hand,
yeah, I mean, this does have a lot of like, oh no, we need to invade. You see, we need more living room. We need a buffer zone.
On the one hand, a bright blessing, a future of hope. On the other hand, a dark future of despair. And if you think this dark map is only a curse for Israel, if you think that, then you should think again. Because Iran's aggression, if it's not checked, will endanger every single country in the Middle East and many, many countries in the rest of the world. Because Iran seeks to impose its radicalism well beyond the Middle East. That's why it funds terror networks on 5 continents. That's why it builds ballistic missiles for nuclear warheads to threaten the entire world. For too long, the world has appeased Iran. It turns a blind eye to its internal repression. It turns a blind eye to its external aggression. Well, that appeasement must end. And that appeasement must end now. Nations of the world should support the brave people of Iran who want to rid themselves of this evil regime. Responsible governments should not only support Israel in rolling back Iran's aggression, they should join Israel. They should join Israel in stopping Iran's nuclear weapons program. In this body, in the Security Council, we're going to have a deliberation in a few months. And I call on the Security Council to snap back UN Security Council sanctions against Iran, because we must all do everything in our power
This is so clownish. I mean, a lot of this is pure propaganda. This trip is propaganda. This address is propaganda. It is purely being done, I would argue, for internal political purposes. You know, like, I know a lot of people attribute a lot to, like, oh, Netanyahu is doing X, Y, or Z to, like, support Donald Trump in the current elections or whatever. You know, he's trying to screw over Kamala Harris's chances because he wants Trump to win. No, most of what Benjamin Netanyahu does is to secure his position domestically in Israel. That is why he does most of the things he does. The happy byproduct for him is that doing the things that are good for him also involve empowering Trump or harming Kamala Harris's chances. So, like, it is it's self-serving.
To ensure that Iran never gets nuclear weapons. For decades, I've been warning the world.
The terrifying thing is that Israel has nuclear weapons. And I wouldn't put it past Netanyahu to use them. Because again, he's a little Hitler. He is a fascist dictator.
Against Iran's nuclear program.
Will the guy ever see the inside of a Hague courtroom? Probably not.
Our actions delayed this program by perhaps a decade. But we haven't stopped it. We've delayed it, but we haven't stopped it. Iran now seeks to weaponize its nuclear program for the sake of the peace and security of all your countries. For the sake of the peace and security of the entire world. We
except for Lebanon.
Must not let that happen. And I assure you, Israel will do everything in its power to make sure it doesn't happen.
I mean, honestly, Story the Bard, that's probably why there hasn't been significant pushback.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the question before us is simple. Which of these two maps that I showed you will shape our future? Will it be the blessings of peace and prosperity for Israel, our Arab partners, and the rest of the world? Or will it be the curse in which Iran and its proxies spread carnage and chaos?
Did Trump scuttle the Iran deal just because Obama? I mean, most of it was to spite Obama. Let's be clear. But Benjamin Netanyahu, I'm sure, was a huge fan of that. I'm sure Benjamin Netanyahu was pushing for that, and Benjamin Netanyahu has gotten a lot of the things he's pushed for from Donald Trump and from Joe Biden. He got the Golan Heights from Trump.
Everywhere. Israel has already made its choice. We've decided to advance the blessing. We're building a partnership for peace with our Arab neighbors while fighting the forces of terror that threaten that peace. For nearly a year, the brave men and women of the IDF have been systematically crushing Hamas's terror army that once ruled Gaza. On October 7th, the day of that invasion into Israel, that terror army numbered nearly 40,000 terrorists. It was
the Golan Heights moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. Trump did a lot for Benjamin Netanyahu.
Armed with more than 15,000 rockets. It had 350 miles of terror tunnels, an underground network bigger than the New York subway system, which they used to wreak havoc above and below ground.
Like all of non-applicable, all of the plans that have been kicked around regarding Gaza, regarding Lebanon, involves seizing territory. Like, all of this is about seizing more territory.
A year later, the IDF has killed or captured more than half of these terrorists, destroyed over 90% of their rocket arsenal, and eliminated the key segments of their terror tunnel network. In major military operations, we destroyed nearly all of Hamas's terror battalions, 23 out of 24 battalions. Now, to complete our victory, we are focused on mopping up Hamas's remaining fighting capabilities. We are taking out senior terrorist commanders and destroying remaining terrorist infrastructure. But all the while,
Which is, by the way, just the infrastructure of Gaza and the West Bank. Like, we've seen their armored killdozers tearing up the roads. That's what you mean by the terrorist infrastructure.
and I'll say this one more time, we remain focused on our sacred mission, bringing our hostages home, and we will not stop until that mission is complete.
Why is the bottom section empty? Because a lot of nations left to protest Netanyahu's speech.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, even with Hamas's greatly diminished military capability, the terrorists still exercise some governing power in Gaza by stealing the food that we enable aid agencies to bring into Gaza. Hamas steals the food, and then they hike the prices. They feed their bellies, and then they fill their coffers.
And then they hike the prices. Bitch, you think people got money? You think people in Gaza have a functioning economy? Are they picking up their briefcase and going to work in all the rubble? Yeah, you could just mail me my check. What are you talking about, bro?
With money that they extort from their own people. They sell the stolen food at exorbitant prices.
With what money? There's not a functioning economy. No one has a job right now in Gaza that they're being paid for. Are you kidding?
And that's how they stay in power. Well, this too has to end, and we're working to bring it to an end.
Like, if someone, I feel like at this point, if someone so much as lights like a bread oven in Gaza, they're gonna get bombed by the IDF and like labeled a manufacturer of terror or something. You know, like.
And the reason is simple. Because if Hamas stays in power, it will regroup, rearm, and attack Israel again.
They're not just digging up the roads in Gaza, Catalina Gearbox. They're digging up the roads in the West Bank, too. Like, the destruction has expanded far beyond just Gaza. They're doing it in the West Bank, too.
And again, as it is vowed to do. So Hamas has got to go. Just imagine, for those who say, well, Hamas has to stay, it has to be part of a post-war Gaza. Imagine, in a post-war situation in World War II, imagine...
I mean, like, this is the current situation unfolding in the West Bank. This is the place where... This is the place where Hamas does not operate. And Palestinians are struggling to find water. We are so happy to get here today and not be stopped by the soldiers. This is the fourth spring the group tried to visit today. The other three were blocked by Israeli settlers with the help of the Israeli military. When they tried to come to the springs on other days in the weeks before, he says Israeli soldiers sent them back. They told us that since October 7th, we are forbidden from coming here. Meanwhile, he says he could see Israeli settlers using the spring and collecting water. Like, they're literally denying Palestinians, wherever they are, access to water. It's crazy. There won't be a post-war because you won't let there be an end to the war. Not until, like, they've achieved their ethnic cleansing goals. At the very least.
Allowing the defeated Nazis in 1945 to rebuild Germany. It's inconceivable. It's ridiculous. It didn't happen then. It's not going to happen now. This is why Israel will reject any rule for Hamas in a post-war Gaza. We don't seek to...
Do you think they will win? Like, Israel? There's no way for them to win.
Howdy ho.
Cannabo Brex, thank you for the tier 2 sub. I appreciate it. Thank you for supporting stream and making this show possible. But no, do I think they can win? No, because their goals for this war are unachievable. Like, and don't take my word for it. Like, the military commanders in Israel know that it's unachievable.
We settle Gaza. What we seek is a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza. Only then can we ensure that this round of fighting will be the last round of fighting. We are ready to work with regional and other partners to support a local civilian administration in Gaza committed to peaceful coexistence. As for the
Charlie,
hostages,
thank you for the gifted
I have a
membership
message
over on YouTube.
for the Hamas captors. Let them go.
Oh, nope, it's not on mute, Charlie. It just the alert makes a sound when it gives the membership to someone for whatever reason.
Let them go. All of them. Those alive today must be returned alive.
When it's all over, what will the situation in the Middle East look like? I genuinely have no way of answering that question because I don't know how far this is going to go. Like, well, we're going to be talking about what immediately followed this address to the UN. But I would describe it as a major escalation, and things are going to look, well, not great. There's been some whisperings that Israel is going to be trying to take a buffer zone in southern Lebanon. We'll see if that is indeed what winds up happening, but the war is certainly expanded.
And the remains of those whom you brutally killed must be returned to their families. Those families here with us today and others in...
Yeah, also, the Marshall Plan helped rebuild all of Europe, including Germany. Like, what is he talking about?
Israel deserve to have a resting place for their loved ones, a place where they can grieve and remember them. This war, ladies and gentlemen, this war can come to an end now. All that has to happen is for Hamas to surrender, lay down its arms, and release all the hostages. But if they don't, we will fight until we achieve victory, total victory.
Oh, so Hamas can't just end this. Oh, Charlie's on mute. Gotcha.
There is no substitute for it. Israel must also defeat Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah is the quintessential terror organization in the world today. It has tentacles that span in all continents. It has murdered more Americans and more Frenchmen than any group except bin Laden. It's murdered the citizens of many countries represented in this room. And it has attacked Israel viciously over the last 20 years. In the last year, completely unprovoked. A day after the Hamas massacre, on October 7th, Hezbollah began attacks against Israel which forced more than 60,000 Israelis on our northern border to leave their homes, becoming refugees in their own land. Hezbollah turned vibrant towns in the north of Israel into ghost towns. So I want you to think about this in equivalent American terms.
Yeah, the tentacles comment, I saw that clipped, and that I thought maybe in context it might seem less weird, but no, it's still weird. That is still a weird comment. Like, why? It is fascist rhetoric, absolutely. But like, it's more than that. It is like straight up Nazi rhetoric, and he should know that. He's mentioned the Nazis a lot in this speech.
Just imagine if terrorists turned El Paso and San Diego into ghost towns. Then ask yourself, how long would the American government tolerate that? A day? A week? A month?
Oh, if you don't know exactly, you know, I suppose some people might not. It's like one of the classic Nazi propaganda posters used to justify the hatred of Jews. Like, it's there's yeah. It's a thing. Ugh. Disgusting.
I doubt they tolerate it even for a single day. Yet Israel has been tolerating this intolerable situation for nearly a year. Well, I've come here today to say enough is enough. We won't rest until our citizens can return safely to their homes. We will not accept a terror army perched on our northern border, able to perpetrate another October 7th style massacre. For 18 years, Hezbollah brazenly refused to implement UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which requires it to move its forces away from our borders. Instead, Hezbollah moved right up to our border. They secretly dug terror tunnels to infiltrate our communities and indiscriminately fired thousands of rockets into our towns and villages. They fire these rockets and missiles not from military sites, not from that. They do that too. But they fire those rockets and missiles after they place them in schools, in hospitals, in apartment buildings, and in the private homes of the citizens of Lebanon. They endanger their own people. They put a missile in every kitchen, a rocket in every garage.
Do you understand what he's doing here? Do you guys understand what he's saying? He is saying that every single civilian target in all of Lebanon is fair game because they are all places that Hezbollah could potentially be. Oh, it's the same thing they said about Gaza. Oh, all of the rockets are in the schools. All of the munitions are in the hospitals. All of the personnel are in the apartment complexes. So it's okay if we vaporize the block. We're gonna get there. Unfortunately, we are going to get there soon.
I said to the people of Lebanon,
Yeah, they're taking human shields. That's why we have to kill both them and the human shields.
this week, get out of the death trap that Hezbollah has put you in. Don't let Nasrallah drag Lebanon into the abyss. We're not at war with you. We're at war with Hezbollah, which is hijacked.
We're not at war with you, but we are going to, like, destroy your entire home and business and everything you know and love. But we're not at war with you.
Hijacked your country and threatens to destroy ours. As long as Hezbollah chooses the path of war, Israel has no choice, and Israel has every right to remove this threat and return our citizens to their homes safely. And that's exactly what we're doing. Just this week, the IDF destroyed large percentages of Hezbollah's rockets, which it built with Iran's funding for 3 decades. We took out senior military commanders who not only shed Israeli blood, but American and French blood as well. And then we took out their replacements. And then
I mean, I don't think he's talking only to Americans. A lot of Israelis also speak English, but it's here to, like he's speaking in this way specifically so that he can reach as many people as possible because it's in his best interest to do so, you know?
Replacements of their replacements. And we'll continue degrading Hezbollah until all our objectives are met. Ladies and gentlemen, we're committed to removing the curse of terrorism that threatens all civilized societies. But to truly realize the blessing of a new Middle East, we must continue the path we paved with the Abraham Accords 4 years ago. Above all, this means achieving a historic peace agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And having seen the blessings that we've already brought with the Abraham Accords, the millions of Israelis who've already flown back and forth across the Arabian Peninsula, over the skies of Saudi Arabia, to the Gulf countries, the trade, the tourism, the joint ventures, the peace. I say to you, what blessings such a peace with Saudi Arabia would bring. It would be a boon to the security and economy of our two countries. It would boost trade and tourism across the region. It would help transform the Middle East into a global juggernaut. Our two countries could cooperate on energy, water, agriculture, artificial...
You know, like, it doesn't surprise me that Benjamin Netanyahu really wants to court the favorable relations with Saudi Arabia, a country run by a dictatorial monarchy and, you know, that's willing to chop up journalists. You know, I'm not surprised.
Intelligence and many, many other fields. Such a peace, I'm sure, would be a true pivot of history. It would usher in a historic reconciliation between the Arab world and Israel, between Islam and Judaism, between Mecca and Jerusalem. While Israel is committed to achieving such a peace, Iran and its terror proxies are committed to scuttling it. That's why one of the best ways to foil Iran's nefarious designs is to achieve the peace. Such a peace would be the foundation for an even broader Abrahamic alliance. And that alliance would include the United States, Israel's current Arab peace partners, Saudi Arabia, and others who choose the blessing of peace. It would advance security and prosperity across the Middle East and bring enormous benefits to the rest of the world. With American support and leadership, I believe this vision can materialize, and much sooner than people think. And as the Prime Minister of Israel, I will do everything in my power to make it happen. This is an opportunity that we and the world should not let go by. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel has made its choice. We seek to move forward to a bright age of prosperity and peace. Iran and its proxies have also made their choice. They want to move back to a dark age of terror and war. And now I have a question.
You know, can I just say, I feel like maybe the country that's receiving billions of dollars of arms. I read a news story from the Times of Israel like a week or so ago about how since October 7th, Israel has received 50,000 tons of weaponry from the United States. 50,000 tons? Like, maybe the group that's getting thousands of tons of weaponry to conduct warfare might be the one engaging in the terror and war. I don't know. I'm spitballing here.
And I pose that question to you. What choice will you make? Will your nation stand with Israel? Will you stand with democracy and peace? Or will you stand with Iran, a brutal dictatorship that subjugates its own people, exports terrorism across the globe? In this battle between good and evil, there must be no equivocation. When you stand with Israel, you stand for your own values and your own interests. Yes, we're defending ourselves, but we're also defending you against a common enemy that through violence and terror seeks to destroy our way of life. So there should be no confusion about this. But unfortunately, there is a lot of it. In many countries,
they're not digging terror tunnels, so they can't be doing the terrorism. Au contraire, Israel built a lot of those tunnels. Actually, they built them when they were last occupying the region. Remember how all of the propaganda about how Al-Shifa Hospital was a Hamas command and control center? It was the main hub the entire time. You guys remember that? You guys remember the Red Barrel room under Al-Shifa? That was all based on the fact that Israel built the underground complex for the hospital. They built it and the tunnels around it. And then they just assumed that Hamas would put a command and control center in the room that they built to serve as the administration hub for the hospital.
And in this very hall, as I've just heard, good is portrayed as evil, and evil is portrayed as good. We see this moral confusion when Israel is falsely accused of genocide, when we defend ourselves against enemies who try to commit.
Alec Gunther, thank you for the raid. Welcome, YouTube raiders. How y'all doing? We're covering Israel and Lebanon, so get ready for some heavy stuff. But also, hello, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on the YouTube stream, and also my name's Jack. I talk about the news and politics, and also, I'm a trans lady. She or her pronouns, please. We love Alec Gunther, don't we, folks? Go give a subscription to Alec Gunther, okay, folks? He's a good content creator. One of the few I actually watch when I'm not in front of my computer. So there you go. That is one hell of an endorsement from me.
Genocide against us. We see this too when Israel is absurdly accused by the ICC prosecutor of deliberately starving Palestinians in Gaza.
You literally had a defense minister talk about the need for collective punishment. You literally talked about that. One of the plans that you are currently looking at to deal with northern Gaza involves collectively starving the Palestinian population. That was reported in Israeli media like 2 days ago.
What an absurdity. We helped bring
Oh yeah,
in
no, Jordan. Yeah, the Judea Samaria is like that is an announcement of an intent to incorporate the West Bank into their nation building project.
700,000 tons of food into Gaza. That's more than 3,000 calories a day for every man, woman, and child in Gaza.
Wow, how generous. How benevolent. Oh, it's almost 3,000 calories per day for every man, woman, and child. Is it getting to those men, women, and children? Or are the trucks being blown up?
We see this moral confusion when Israel is falsely accused of deliberately targeting civilians.
Again, also, by all international measurements, not enough aid is going into Gaza. There are not enough food trucks going into Gaza in order to feed the population. That his statement there is just a lie. But I wanted to point out that even if it were true, it would still not be enough to feed the people by getting the food to where it needs to go.
We don't want to see a single person, a single innocent person die. That's always a tragedy. And that's why we do
Keep that in mind.
so much to minimize civilian casualties, even as our enemies use civilians as human shields. And no army has done what Israel is doing to minimize civilian casualties. We drop flyers, we send text messages, we make phone calls by the millions to ensure that Palestinian civilians get out of harm's way. We spare no effort in this
Yeah, I'm sure.
noble pursuit. We see yet another profound moral confusion when self-described progressives march against the democracy of Israel. Don't they realize they support the Iranian-backed...
You literally tried to overthrow your own democratic system a year ago. This motherfucker introduced legislation that would have essentially bypassed the court system of Israel to remove any kind of checks and balance on his particular position, meaning that he could effectively wield dictatorial power for life, okay? This guy does not care about democracy. Millions of Israelis had to turn out to protest against his attempt to overthrow democracy last year. He has no respect for democracy whatsoever.
goons in Tehran and in Gaza. The goons who gun down protesters, murder women for not covering their hair, and hang gays in public squares, some progressives. According to the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Iran funds and fuels many of the protesters against Israel. Who knows, maybe some of the protesters, or even many of the protesters outside this building now. Ladies and gentlemen, King Solomon, who reigned in our eternal capital, Jerusalem, 3,000 years ago, proclaimed something that is familiar to all of you. He said, "There is nothing new under the sun." Well, in an age of space travel, quantum physics, and artificial intelligence, some would argue that's a debatable statement. But one thing is undeniable.
What an amusing anecdote.
There is definitely nothing new at the United Nations. Take it from me, I first spoke from this podium as Israel's ambassador to the UN in 1984. That's exactly 40 years ago. And in my maiden speech here, I think it's the same podium, by the way. In my maiden speech here, I spoke against a proposal to expel Israel from this body. 4 decades later, I find myself defending Israel against that same preposterous proposal.
It's a proposal because you keep violating international law. It's not coming out of nowhere, my guy. It's because of the repeated violations of international law and the doubling and quadrupling down on ethnic cleansing. Like that's what it is, man.
And who's leading the charge this time? Not Hamas, but Abbas, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. This is the man who claims he wants peace with Israel. Yet he still refuses to condemn the horrific massacre of October 7th. He's still paying hundreds of millions to terrorists who murder Israelis and Americans. It's called pay for slay. The more you murder, the more you get paid. And he still wages unremitting diplomatic warfare against Israel's right to exist and against Israel's right to defend itself. And by the way, they amount to the same thing. Because if you can't defend yourself, you can't exist. Not in our neighborhood, certainly, and maybe not in yours. Standing in this podium 40 years ago, I told the sponsors of that outrageous resolution to expel Israel, gentlemen, check your fanaticism at the door. Today,
I want you to really keep in mind all of the times where he's chastising the world for being so unfair to Israel and its geopolitical decisions. Keep that in mind. I'm so furious as we go through this.
I tell President Abbas and all of you who would shamefully support that resolution, check your fanaticism at the door.
Oh, got him, girl.
The singling out of the one and only Jewish state continues to be a moral stain on the United Nations. It has made this once respected institution contemptible in the eyes of decent people everywhere. But for the Palestinians, this UN House of Darkness is home court. They know that in this swamp of anti-Semitic bile, there's an automatic majority.
Yeah, geez, I wonder why they keep wanting to throw you out of the United Nations Assembly, man.
Willing to demonize the Jewish state on anything. In this.
Also, it's not anti-Semitic to criticize a state. It is not bigoted to criticize the policies of a state.
Anti-Israel Flat Earth Society, any false charge, any outlandish allegation can muster a majority. In the last decade, there have been more resolutions passed against Israel in this hall at the UN General Assembly than against the entire world combined. Actually, more than twice as many. Since 2014, this body condemned Israel 107.
Yeah, he called the UN a place of darkness. Yep, he's criticizing the UN in the UN
74 times. It condemned all the other countries in the world 73 times. That's more than 100 extra condemnations for the Jewish state. What hypocrisy, what a double standard, what a joke. So the UN's hostility. So all the speeches you heard today, all the hostility directed at Israel this year, it's not about Gaza. It's about Israel.
I mean,
Israel.
Yeah, I think it is about, it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Mostly about the slaughtering of children in column A done by the people in column B. Like that's, yeah, it is about that.
It's always been about Israel. About Israel's very existence.
Nope. It is very specifically about the acts of violence Israel is committing as we speak.
And I say to you, until Israel, until the Jewish state is treated like other nations, until this anti-Semitic swamp is drained, the UN will be viewed by fair-minded people everywhere as nothing more than a contemptuous farce. Now, given the anti-Semitism at the UN, it should surprise no one that the prosecutor at the ICC, one of the UN's affiliated organs, is considering issuing arrest warrants against me and Israel's defense minister. the democratically elected leaders of the democratic state of Israel. The ICC prosecutors rushed to judgment. His refusal to treat Israel with its independent courts the way other democracies are treated is hard to explain by anything other than pure anti-Semitism. Ladies and gentlemen,
again, it's not anti-Semitic to criticize the geopolitical maneuverings of a state. Anyone who tells you that doesn't know shit about shit, or is trying to sell you something. And in this case, he's trying to sell you on genocide. And you know what?
Sometimes a genocide is just a genocide.
the real war criminals are not in Israel. They're in Iran. They're in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen. Those of you who stand with these war criminals, those of you who stand with evil against good, with a curse against the blessing, those of you who do so should be ashamed of yourselves. But I have a message for you. Israel will win this battle. We'll win this battle because we don't have a choice. After generations in which our people were slaughtered, remorselessly butchered, and no one raised a finger in our defense, we now have a state. We now have a brave army, an army of incomparable courage, and we are defending ourselves. As the book of Samuel says in the Bible, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. The eternity of Israel will not falter.
In a just world, this man would be arrested the second he stopped giving this speech.
In the Jewish people's epic journey from antiquity, in our odyssey through the tempests and upheavals of modern times, that ancient promise has always been kept, and it will hold true for all time. To borrow a great poet's phrase, Israel will not go gently into that good night. We will never need to rage against the dying of the light.
That's not how that poem works. Like, you realize that. Like, that entire poem is about dying. Like, does he get that? Does he get that? The opening of that poem is old age should burn and... Sorry. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. It is a poem about dying. And it is a poem about the inevitability of dying. Like, it's actually kind of insane for him to invoke that poem. It's so on the nose that I feel like if I wrote that as the speech of like a fascist dictator, it would seem too on the nose. It would seem too on the nose. It's also about never giving up. Yeah, it's about never giving up, but if you'll notice something, throughout the poem, The wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on that sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. This is not a song, or a poem, rather, about someone who's going to be okay. It is a poem for funerals. It is a poem for deathbeds. It is a poem about fighting on until you die. The same way one can rage and fight against the setting of the sun, but it won't stop the sun from setting. And in that way, like, invoking this poem at the end here is like an acknowledgement on some unspoken level that the path Israel is currently on is self-destructive. That in this blind rage, this cacophony of hatred and violence, the end of it, the end result of it is the dying of the light. And he doesn't realize that that poem about death, about dying, you can't simply say, well, I'm going to live forever. You know? That's not how life works. That's not how light works. It's just kind of a fascinating admission.
Because the torch of Israel will forever shine bright. To the people of Israel, and to the soldiers of Israel, I say, be strong and of good courage. חזקו ואמצו ואל תיראו מפניהם, כי אדוני אלוהיך הוא ההולך עמך, לא ירפך ולא יעזבך. עם ישראל חי, the people of Israel live, now, tomorrow, forever. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the State of Israel
So in a just world, he would leave that room and immediately get arrested. But that's not the world we live in. Instead, we live in a much nastier world, where in reality, what wound up happening immediately after this was this. This is Benjamin Netanyahu at his hotel in New York, ordering the massive bombardment of Lebanon's capital. A lot of bombs were dropped on Beirut today. And I do want to say, we have some video here. It is disturbing. So you might want to step out for a minute. But here we go. This is the bombing taking place in Beirut. residential areas. And then you just start to hear the screaming. Yeah, it's a lot.
اخوان هياها قدامي هياها صاب المخيمات هون على هيدا على العامليه مخيم البرج هياها اخوان هياها.
This is their capital city. The capital city of Lebanon. Just crazy. Remember how Benjamin Netanyahu during that speech talked about how any civilian target in Lebanon was justified because it may contain Hezbollah munitions?
عم ادخل المخيم يا شباب، عم ادخل المخيم من جهة العملية حاج دجاج.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Moments ago, the Israel Defense Forces carried out a precise strike on the central headquarters of the Hezbollah terror organization that served as the epicenter of Hezbollah's terror. Hezbollah's central headquarters.
Now, they are claiming that this was a strike to try and assassinate the leader of Hezbollah. But it's an escalation. It leveled several residential apartment complexes.
Was intentionally built under residential buildings in the heart of the Dahia in Beirut, as part of Hezbollah's strategy of using Lebanese people as human shields. On October,
it's the same goddamn excuse every single time.
8th, Hezbollah started attacking Israel. After almost a year of Hezbollah firing rockets, missiles, and suicide drones at Israeli civilians, after almost a year of Israel warning the world and telling them that Hezbollah must be stopped, Israel is doing what every sovereign state in the world would do if they had a terror organization that seeks their destruction on their border, taking the necessary action to protect our people so that Israeli families can leave their homes safely and securely. Thank you.
Lies upon lies upon lies, man. Like, genuinely. Genuinely. They never produce evidence about, like, oh, yeah, this is why we believed that there was a terrorist leader under there. They just go ahead and bomb the buildings, and it doesn't matter even if they're right or not. They'll just say anything to justify it. It's crazy. Yeah, Israeli warplanes flattened several residential buildings just south of Beirut on Friday evening. The initial assessment of Israeli intelligence agencies based on the number and size of the bombs used and information gathered from inside the militant group is that Mr. Nasrallah has been killed, the officials say, but they cautioned that the conclusion may yet change. They were targeting him as he was convening a leadership meeting in the underground complex, which, again, we don't have proof that complex was there. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But we sure as shit don't have any evidence about that. At least that's public. A few hours later, Israel's forces launched a series of new airstrikes early Saturday on buildings in the same neighborhood, known as the Daya, after warning residents to flee, the military said. The strikes were intended to destroy weapons. Again, I feel like the New York Times is so shit at this. The strikes were intended to destroy weapons. Says who? Who said that? Was it Israel? Was it the Israeli military? Why are you stating their intent as if it is fact? Killing Mr. Nasrallah would be a major escalation in Israel's rapidly expanding campaign against Hezbollah over the last 2 weeks. Yeah, I mean, basically, if you kill the leader of Hezbollah, they're gonna throw everything they got at an invading force. It's not gonna like change their overall strat. Yeah. President Biden was briefed by his national security team and is receiving regular updates on the latest developments in the Middle East. According to sources close to him, he allegedly gave a high five to the people briefing him, saying, "We did it. We finally have peace in the Middle East." He didn't do that. I made that last part up. But I mean, he does the geopolitical maneuvering equivalent of that. Let's be fair. Yeah, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, called an emergency meeting of the Supreme National Security Council on Friday night in response to reports that Mr. Nasrallah was the target of the strike. Ibrahim Azizi, the head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, said that Israel has opened the gates of hell against itself and its strike on Hezbollah's headquarters in Lebanon in comments to Iranian state television. He said the axis of resistance, the regional militia backed by Iran, were better coordinated and armed than ever and will respond with force at the right time. Yeah. Things are going to be popping off. Whatever happened to the Biden pier? The pier became unmoored and unusable as a result. So, there was a bunch of wasted time and effort, mainly as a propaganda tool to prop up and make more acceptable Israel's genocidal campaign. Yeah, Biden told allies that Netanyahu doesn't want to end fighting in Lebanon. After a week of back and forth with Israel that increasingly frustrated Biden, Israel launched a massive strike against Hezbollah targeting the group's leader. Biden told confidants and allies this week that he did not believe that Israel's leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, wanted to halt to hostilities with Hezbollah, expressing increasing frustration as a proposed ceasefire plan fell apart, according to two people familiar with conversations. One person who spoke with Biden said the president felt Netanyahu had humiliated both Secretary Antony Blinken and Biden himself with his back and forth about a ceasefire proposal with Hezbollah. And it's like, no shit. He's been doing that the entire time. He's been putting out public-facing statements, effectively laughing at U.S. allies. The fact that Biden is ignorant of this cannot be an accident. It is either a result of his advanced old age, or it is simply because he just ignores the jibes and simply is ideologically aligned with Netanyahu. Like, Biden has no self-respect whatsoever. Cyborg Elf Gaming, that sounds great. I'm glad you have a new transgender coworker. Yeah, Netanyahu at first told U.S. officials he supported a pause in the fighting with the Lebanon-based militant group, then roundly rejected the ceasefire proposal once it was made public, which, wowee, where have we seen that happen over and over and over and over again? Where have we seen that happen? Like, did Biden not get it when, like, months and months ago, he put together and publicly stated a ceasefire proposal that then Hamas agreed to, and then Israel sabotaged it, aka Benjamin Netanyahu sabotaged that deal that would have returned the hostages? Did he not realize that Netanyahu was being a disingenuous weasel the entire time? It's not subtle. It's not subtle. There's no part of this that is, like, intelligible. Yeah, the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, says that there will be unimaginable consequences for across the Middle East. Because, guys, not only is Netanyahu bombing the capital of another sovereign nation, which is a huge escalation of war, but he is also antagonizing the largest paramilitary group in the world that is also backed by Iran. Like, there are, like, this is, I don't see this de-escalating. Let me put it that way. Like, the sad news and the sad part of this is that there is no mechanism that will de-escalate this. There is no voice of reason within Israel that will push for a de-escalation. At least no voice of reason that is in a position of power capable of pushing for reason. Like, Israel's political positioning is such that it is locked into a march towards, like, annihilation or death. Like, it's a death cult fascist mentality that's taken hold there. And Iran has had, weirdly enough, has had restraint in this situation. Like, when it retaliated before with drones and missiles and such, it did so in a way that it telegraphed that that's what it was doing. It made clear that, hey, we're going to do it at around this time with this amount of strength, have all of the stuff together to intercept it. We need to do this because we need to save face after you really fucked us over there with your assassination strikes. But that's not going to be the case this time. Like, there's not a de-escalating mechanism this time. Iran and Hezbollah are allies, like, very directly. And I would be shocked if Iran does not become directly involved in this conflict very soon. There is a slim possibility that maybe they will merely provide material support to Hezbollah and avoid directly engaging themselves. But at this point, I don't know if that's going to be the case. BB keeps poking the bear with a knife. To be clear, it's not with a knife. Like, the bombs they're using are the bombs Biden was holding, like the 2,000-pound bombs. Like, that's currently what is what's being used. We have a little diagram here. Buildings known to have been destroyed in the strike. 4 apartment complexes. Hundreds, if not thousands, have flooded the streets of Beirut. They're sleeping in parks, on sidewalks, on beaches, because they don't feel safe in their homes. These are the areas in South Beirut where the Israeli military ordered residents to evacuate. The evacuation orders were confusing, however, because the Israeli military told residents to stay 500 meters away from specific building complexes, but the map showed a much smaller evacuation area. So, what could go wrong with confusing messaging around bombing locations? What could go wrong? Look, they're only going to bomb a huge swath of the city. Yeah, 4 hours ago, they're still continuing to bomb. Again, a lot of these targets are like civilian apartments, etc. Cool. Sweet. Can now see additional explosions taking place in Daya, aligning roughly to where the Israeli military warned people to evacuate from. A fiery flash of light just illuminated the night sky. Lebanon's health ministry said at least 6 people have now been killed and more than 90 injured by the Israeli strikes on Friday in the Daya, the densely packed civilian area near Beirut, where Hezbollah holds sway. Search teams were still working to remove the rubble, and the death toll is likely to rise significantly because, again, they leveled 4 apartment buildings while people were inside. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken told reporters that Biden administration believes the way forward is through diplomacy, not conflict. Well, you know what? We should probably be doing a little bit more to ensure the diplomacy part. Is that live? No, it's from like the last few hours. Like, Jesus. It was like Judgment Day. Deafening blasts send residents of Beirut suburbs fleeing after deadly Israeli strikes. An Israeli strike overnight killed 15 members of the family, leaving 1 sole survivor in Karakno, a town in eastern Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. 15 members of a family just annihilated. But I'm sure they were all Hamas. They were all Hamas, all Hezbollah, right? Is it all religion? No. The main reason for this is capitalism. Capitalism fuels colonialism. And we are seeing the end state of colonialism, which is fascism. I mean, look at this. I can't get over the... I can't get over, like, the screaming in some of these videos. It's been haunting me all day. It's truly, truly awful what's happening. What about the people in the buildings? Al Jazeera consistently asking very relevant questions. Daya is a densely populated area home to more than 500,000 civilians, many of whom have been scrambling to evacuate as Israel started attacking the area last week. Dozens of people had already been killed in air raids targeting the neighborhood before Friday. The neighborhood was largely destroyed during the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah war. Israel has accused Hezbollah of intentionally placing in its headquarters under residential buildings and of using the Lebanese people as human shields. While Hezbollah has its headquarters in the area, Daya, quote, is a suburb just like any other suburb in the world, quote, unquote, said Al Jazeera correspondent Ali Hashem. Many families were starting to think about leaving, weighing their options, but where? He said, noting that locations across Lebanon have been targeted by attacks in recent days. Currently, everything is being hit. One resident who lives in the neighboring Palestinian refugee camp, Burj al-Baraneh, told Al Jazeera the attack shook the entire area and camp residents are now fleeing to other areas because even in other countries, Palestinians have to flee the bombing of Israel. How many people were hurt? Early reports indicate at least 2 people were killed, 76 wounded, but the death toll was expected to be far higher. And that is largely because all of the people that were in the apartment buildings are currently buried under the rubble of the apartment buildings. So, yeah, in the next few days, the death toll from this one strike is likely going to get much, much higher. Punky Gal, I cannot stress enough, I do not care about Chapel Rowan's stances on this issue. I don't care.
Marking.
We're gonna watch through how the Pentagon is handling this. They held a briefing 2 days ago.
Marking 3 years of enhanced security partnership and provides an opportunity for Secretary Austin to meet with his UK and Australian counterparts to review progress and outline steps for continued work under Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 of AUKUS.
Chapel Rowan is a very good singer.
We'll have more to share in the coming days, but under Pillar 1, you can imagine, or you can...
I don't dislike her. When I'm talking about this, I do not care about Chapel Rowan or celebrity positions. I care about this issue. That's why I'm talking about this issue and not celebrities. You know?
Expect the Secretary to reaffirm the United States' commitment to supporting Australia's acquisition of a conventionally armed, nuclear-powered submarine capability. Operation of advanced capabilities to shared vision to work this week. Norfolk. The strike group will operate in the U.S. European Command area of response aerial force. These are questions.
Tara. Thanks, Sabrina. So later this week, we're possibly expecting an agreement on the withdrawal or transition of U.S. troops in Iraq. What still needs to be done in that agreement? It seems from the Iraqi perspective that this decision's been made and the details are set.
So thanks, Tara. Appreciate the question. I think as you alluded to, we'll probably have more details to share later this week. what we've said from the beginning is that we know that the global coalition is that international coalition is going to transition into a bilateral security relationship with the Iraqis.
The status of the refueler.
Some more for you on that. Caused that damage, but that, there was no.
I know I'm skipping ahead a lot, but I just want to know what she has to say about this.
Diplomatic resolution and a solution to prevent an all-out war.
But also strikes in Lebanon.
That's right. We're still.
Israel's military chief, I think earlier today, said that strikes in Lebanon would continue in order to not only destroy Hezbollah's infrastructure, but also prepare for a possible ground invasion. Just a general comment, and do you see a ground invasion as likely or even imminent?
If that happens, by the way, this is all going to be a complete and utter shit show.
So in terms of a ground incursion or ground invasion, that's really for the Israelis to speak to. We certainly don't want to see any action taken that could lead to further escalation in the region. We still believe that there is time and space for diplomacy. We want to see a diplomatic resolution and a solution to prevent an all-out war. But in terms of, the Israeli operations, I'd have to refer you to them to speak to that.
And just to follow up, last week I think the secretary had near daily calls with his Israeli counterpart. He hasn't spoken with them since the 22nd. Is there any reason for that? And should we expect any conversations between the two of them in the coming days?
I think you can expect them to continue to engage. Just because they haven't spoken every day doesn't mean that, our teams haven't been in communication. Again, he engages with Minister Golan on a pretty regular basis. And when we have more to share on when the next call happens, we'll certainly read it out. But, just because he hasn't had one every single day this week doesn't mean that we're not engaging with the Israelis. You've seen, maybe not from this building, but other agencies part of this administration.
I mean, none of us disagree that you're engaging with the Israelis. Our main criticism here is that you're not achieving anything via your interactions with the Israelis. You're not actually achieving the goals you're saying you're trying to achieve. And that's a problem.
Engaging their Israeli counterparts, so we're continuing that dialogue. Fadi.
Thank you, Sabrina. Is there any support that the Pentagon is providing to the Israeli military in the current situation in Lebanon?
In terms of any ground support or air support?
Absolutely. Any support,
no.
Even in terms of intelligence?
No support.
Not even intelligence sharing. No. So up until, I guess, unless there's some changes, you've been describing what's happening as defensive operations. Mm-hmm. I believe in the first day, almost 500 civilians were killed, including women and children in Lebanon.
Yeah, a lot of civilians are going to die in Lebanon, guys.
Civilian infrastructure has been damaged severely. Almost 1,300 airstrikes. Today, up until 3 p.m. Beirut time, more than 50 towns and villages have been hit by Israelis. International organizations are describing what happened the first day as the highest death toll in Lebanon since the end of the civil war. So I'm just curious, what criteria are you using to describe what's happening as defensive operation?
Yeah, this is some of the most death Lebanon has experienced in a lifetime, maybe multiple lifetimes. The amount of suffering that is being inflicted upon just unrelated Lebanese people is incalculable. But still, the United States raises the diplomatic shield. Oh, no, it's a defensive conflict. They're not at war with Lebanon. Okay, they're not invading Lebanon. They're just de-Hezbollification. They're just pursuing the de-Hezbollification of Lebanon.
Well, Fadi, I think I'd have to point you back to October 8th when Lebanese Hezbollah attacked Israel following the brutal attack that Hamas launched on October 7th. So these are still defensive operations. We understand the threat that Israel faces. We are not supporting their operations when it comes to Lebanon. The support that you're seeing, or what you're seeing when it comes to U.S. forces in the region, is for our own force protection. And should we need to come to the defense of Israel, like we saw from that large-scale attack from Iran, we've positioned forces to do that. But when it comes to Lebanon, the U.S. military has no involvement in Israel's operations. So just want to lay that flat. In terms of some of what you just referenced, this is exactly why we're pushing for a diplomatic solution. We don't want to see innocent civilians, lose their lives. We want to see a de-escalation happen, and you're seeing engagement from, all parts of this administration, including at UNGA right now. We're calling for a de-escalation, and we believe that a diplomatic off-ramp is the best way to resolve what's happening on that northern border.
Last question: did any official in the Pentagon communicate any concerns about the high death toll among Lebanese civilians? I mean, I know we know in Gaza that was a constant conversation.
The load of horseshit that this lady is hauling for the Pentagon is honestly awe-inspiring.
Has anyone raised that issue in relation to Lebanon?
Without getting into more details of the Secretary's calls with Minister Gallant, we are, of course, always concerned of civilian casualties. We're seeing some of these strikes take place in areas where there are civilians. We're also seeing Israel notify populations to clear those areas. Our focus, and you're seeing a full court press here from the United States government and this administration, we want to see a diplomatic solution, and we want to see it, urgently.
But we're not willing to do any. So the thing that's so frustrating about this is that the United States, and Joe Biden in particular, have so many levers of power available to press in order to put pressure on Israel to stop doing what it's doing, to stop slaughtering civilians. There are so many methods available to us to actually do that, and we just the powers that be, the capital powers that be in our country, do not want the spice to stop flowing. So they do not press any of those levers. They do not put any pressure on Israel, and instead we have a song and dance to distract us, to make it seem like something is happening, to provide a smokescreen while Benjamin Netanyahu and his fascist death cult march across the Middle East and cause more death and suffering while seizing land and territory.
And that's why you're seeing engagement, whether it be at UNGA or, in calls that the Secretary is doing with Minister Gallant, and not just at his level, but, at other levels as well. We want to see, we don't want to see any action taken on either side that would lead to further escalation. We want to see this de-escalate, and the best off-ramp for that to prevent an all-out war is through diplomatic means.
Thank you.
Tom.
Thanks very
Keep in mind, this was 2 days ago before, Israel started bombing the capital of Lebanon.
How confident are you that you can achieve a diplomatic off-ramp, especially given the past nearly 12 months where the US has been unable to broker any kind of sustained ceasefire in Gaza? So for the situation with Hezbollah and Israel, how confident are you that we're not going to see a full-scale conflict?
Well, I'd, push back on that respectfully. We have seen periods where there has been a ceasefire put in place, and we have seen, the ability to get, we were talking, months earlier about humanitarian aid being able to get in. That was something.
This is so fucking furious. Yeah, months ago we managed to get some more humanitarian aid in, and 10 months ago we had a ceasefire for like 2 weeks, and no progress since.
That this administration brokered to make sure that we could get humanitarian aid and supplies in. So, look, and not to reiterate just what I said to Fadi, but you're seeing a full court press from this administration at all levels for a diplomatic.
No, we're not. We're seeing a dog and pony show. Okay, we're seeing diddly shit.
Solution. Nothing is off the table. we don't assess that either side wants a larger scale, wider regional conflict. But we're doing everything that we can to prevent that from happening. And that's why you're seeing the engagements that the president is doing from the secretary and then on down in the building.
And while I appreciate that you don't want to speak for Israel, are you able to share anything in terms of what you've seen along the Lebanon-Israel border in terms of movement either side of it? Does it look like there's a ramp up towards some kind of a incursion?
Right now it doesn't, without characterizing Israeli operations and letting them speak to them for themselves, it doesn't look like anything is imminent. What we're seeing on that northern border is an increase in, the tit for tat going back and forth strikes between Israel and Lebanese Hezbollah. And that is our concern. We are concerned about a miscalculation. We don't want to see.
Just as an FYI, this was recorded 2 days ago. Yesterday, Israel called up reservists in its military. So this does seem like it's going to happen.
A wider regional conflict, and that's why in every conversation that we have, in the conversations that are happening in New York, we are continuing to press for a diplomatic resolve.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, also, and this is where we are today. Israeli troops on Lebanon border say they're ready for ground invasion. The Israel Defense Forces continued to mass troops along the country's border with Lebanon on Friday in preparation for a possible invasion as they braced for Hezbollah's response to their massive strike. We are prepared for a ground invasion, 20-year-old Lior Papazmadov said during a break with his tank unit in a wooded area near the border. We don't know if it's going to happen, but we are preparing. I mean, if they're massing troops at the border like that, it's going to happen. You know?
We all know that Secretary Austin is always in contact with his Israeli counterpart. Does the Secretary have any objections to the way Israel is conducting its operations inside Lebanon?
In terms of?
In terms of, as you may know, targeting civilians, maybe carpet bombing to the villages along the border.
Well, I mean, something that we've raised is we don't want to see this escalate. And any time that there is actions taken that could further escalate the war, that's or like a broader conflict, that we want to avoid a regional war. The Secretary, in all of his conversations, urges restraint and urges, the Israelis to consider civilian casualties. And that's something that we've said from the very beginning. Look, I'm not going to get into more details on their private conversations, but of course it's something that the Secretary discusses with his counterpart and will continue to raise.
I mean, could you confirm if the Secretary told Gallant that they need to avoid the infrastructure in Lebanon?
I think what I can tell you is what I reiterated earlier, is that, of course, we are always concerned where there are strikes in areas where there is a concentrated civilian population. That's something that the Secretary raises on his calls with Minister Gallant. It's something that, at different levels in this building, we also raise with our Israeli counterparts, but I'm just not going to be able to go beyond that. Liz.
Thanks, Sabrina. On China's ICBM test launch, a U.S. defense official said earlier today that China gave the U.S. warning it was going to do this launch. Was that through military channels or diplomatic channels?
I don't have more specifics to provide on the channels, but we were given some advance notice, but I'm just not going to get into more specifics of that. I will say that is a good thing, and that is moving in the right direction in terms of, getting that advanced notification, and that further reduces the risks of any misperception and miscalculation. So we certainly welcome that.
Were any U.S. citizens at harm by this test in any way during it or following it?
Not to my knowledge. Yeah. Warren.
Just a quick question. Israeli officials have said their strategy with Lebanon is escalate to de-escalate. Does the Pentagon think that's a viable strategy for how to conduct operations with Lebanon?
So I'm not going to, characterize.
Yeah, about this insane thing that you guys said. We're going to escalate to de-escalate. Yeah, about that insane thing you said, that insanely, dystopian thing you said. What about that? Also, Justin Freakin, thank you so much for the raid.
The Israelis'
Hey, Avalon of
operations.
Babylon.
What I can tell you is only, our view and our perception is that any type of escalation that could lead.
How are you going to make sense of this one?
To a miscalculation, we don't want to see. We want to see steps that lead to de-escalation and frankly, steps that lead to a diplomatic off-ramp, which we believe is the best solution here. That's what we're pushing for. That's what you're seeing.
So you don't believe that escalating, in fact, leads to de-escalation?
Happen at UNGA. That's also what you're seeing the secretary, continue to emphasize in his calls with Minister Gallant. And when he has the next call, that will be something that, I'm sure he would reiterate as well. Okay. Sure.
In response to Tom's question, you said it doesn't look like anything is imminent. Was that in reference to a Israeli incursion into Lebanon?
I believe the context was in terms of a ground incursion. So I was saying in that context, it doesn't look like something is imminent. But again, I'd refer you to the Israelis to speak to their own operations. Rio.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question on Chinese ICBM launch.
Of course.
So what's your assessment of this unusual ICBM launch into the Pacific Ocean? And do you think this is a provocative action? And especially, do you think they want to send a message to the U.S.?
In terms of, the whys, I'd refer you to the PRC to speak to that. We monitored the ICBM test. To Liz's question, again, we did receive some advance notification of this ICBM test, and we believe that that was a good thing. That was a step in the right direction, and it does lead, to preventing any misperception or miscalculation. What we can do here from the department is continue to press for a more regularized bilateral notification arrangement when it comes to ballistic missile and space launches. And this is something that we've proposed with the PRC, and it represents, a common sense confidence building measure. So we want to see these types of notifications continue. Yes.
A question about presidential drawdown authority with regard to Ukraine. Could you tell us what the department's plan is to?
Okay. I think that's about all we're going to get from this, but it is... I don't know. I get so tired and angry about this topic. Even the AP is is this war? The Israeli-Hezbollah conflict is hard to define or predict. I will give you that it's hard to predict where this is going to go. But I'm going to tell you, I feel like if you're bombing the capital of another country over and over again, and you've dropped thousands of bombs across various villages across the entire country, that's war. These aren't targeted assassinations. You are just carpet bombing a country.
DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
We turn now to Lebanon, where some 500,000 people have been displaced by Israel's bombardment.
500,000 people have been displaced by the bombing. Is this war?
The Lebanese Health Ministry reports at least 72 people were killed and nearly 400 wounded in Israeli attacks on Wednesday, bringing the death toll to over 620 in recent days.
I'm sorry, if Mexico conducted a bombing campaign on targeted areas of Texas and killed 600 people, the United States would glass the entire country. The fuck did Lebanon do? It's the home of Hezbollah, one of the largest paramilitaries in the world that's been trading rocket fire with Israel for years.
Earlier today, Israel rejected a proposed 21-day ceasefire that had been called for by the United States, France, Canada, Australia, Japan, Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Israel has called up 2 brigades to the Lebanese border in a sign that a ground invasion could be imminent. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called for peace on Wednesday.
Hell is breaking loose in Lebanon. An all-out war must be avoided at all costs. It would surely be an all-out catastrophe. The people of Lebanon, as well as the people of Israel and the people of the world, cannot afford Lebanon to become another Gaza.
We go now to Beirut, where we're joined by Lara Bitar, editor-in-chief of The Public Source, a Beirut-based independent media organization. Lara, if you can talk about what's happening on the ground in Beirut, and here we are in New York, right next to the United Nations. You have this international call for a ceasefire, but apparently the Netanyahu government of Israel is saying no. The Israeli general in charge of the IDF forces rallying troops, saying he's preparing them for a ground invasion of Lebanon.
Good morning. Here in Beirut, nobody really has any hope in these processes in the United Nations, in the words of the Biden administration, or in the words also of the Netanyahu government. I wanted to share with you some things that were relayed to me by one of our journalists who's now working in the South. He's going around to different schools that are hosting people who have been displaced from their homes but remain in southern Lebanon. So first, he relayed to me that people are very, very tired. They're unable to sleep for longer than a few minutes at a time because of the relentless bombardment by Israel.
Yeah, and they're afraid to sleep inside of shelters because the shelters are the places most likely to be bombed.
And he said that the shelters are full with elderly people who have lived through so many massacres and witnessed so much horror inflicted by the Israeli settler colony. And he shared the story of one woman in particular. He said that she was in her 80s. She was wearing her house key as a pendant. And she told him that this is nothing in comparison to what they have lived through over the past few decades. And she mentioned the 1982 Israeli invasion of Beirut, the first Qana massacre in 1996, the second Qana massacre in 2006, and so on and so forth. And the one thing that I want to relay here is that for a lot of these people who have been displaced from their homes, whose homes have been destroyed, their attachment to their land only grows stronger. And this is a prevailing sentiment among those who have been displaced. And this is not uncommon for Lebanon. So if you will just allow me 30 seconds or so, I would like to read a brief passage that I came across yesterday. Written by Mehdi Amel, who was a Marxist intellectual. And he wrote this a few months after the 1982 invasion of Beirut. And he writes, "They said that the war in Lebanon would be swift, and that in a few days those who have not knelt and who understand only the language of force would kneel. They declared that there would be no salam but shalom, and that Israel is the Rome of our modern times. To the kings of Israel, to the scum of our nation and our foul Arab regimes, to the petty fascists and to their imperialist masters we say, it pleases us to spit in your faces. We will fight you even with our nails. Our fists are the compass of history, and the bullet of our freedom will pierce your hearts. To them we say, brick by brick, we build a world on your graves. You are the dustbin of history, and Beirut is the city of the free. We have vowed that we will resist you. And this is not to say that everyone in Lebanon shares this sentiment. And definitely not the over 200,000 up to 500,000 people who have been displaced from their homes over the past few weeks. Because there is a lot of suffering, there is a lot of hardship right now. People are struggling to find housing, shelter, food, diapers, milk. Hospitals are at capacity. People are really exhausted and suffering across the board. But for the most part, this pain can be pinpointed, the source of this pain can be pinpointed to the presence of the Israeli settler state in our region that continues to wreak havoc in Palestine, in Lebanon, and across most of the world.
So Lara Bitar, you talked about this quotation that you read from the 1982, when Israel invaded in 1982, and you've said that you don't have much faith in a ceasefire. So if you could provide some context to a possible imminent invasion, Israeli invasion of Lebanon, talk about what happened in not just 1982, but also in 1978 and 2006.
I think we have to take very, very seriously every genocidal intent that is now being uttered by...
I mean, I don't know that Lebanon's military is capable of actually repelling Israel. Just Lebanon army... size. Let's see. Their armed forces consist of 84,200 active personnel. Yeah. I mean, Israel can field a military like 5 times that size, so it's not looking great. Israel also has, I believe, both air and sea superiority, so like it's a horrifically unbalanced conflict from the start. The main thing is, if Lebanon were to organize and fight like officially, it would likely do so alongside Hezbollah. Hezbollah, again, as I've repeatedly said, has the largest paramilitary organization on the planet. They have potentially up to or over 100,000 troops, a lot of military equipment and backing from Iran. So you know, those combined forces could be like 180,000, which again, you can see why this is a much different problem than a much different situation than Israel invading Gaza, you know, against a force that has like 15,000 troops.
By different government and military officials in Israel. Lebanon has a long history of invasions and occupation and terror by the Israeli state. And we can go even further back to 47, 48. Lebanon seized over a dozen Lebanese towns and villages. In 78, there was also an invasion in 82. The 82 invasion lasted until the liberation in May 2000. There was also an attempted ground operation in 2006. And in terms of the 2006 attempt attempted ground invasion into Lebanon, soldiers who returned home recounted how traumatizing it was for them, how they felt that they were fighting with ghosts. They could not see the fighters on the other side. So I think it's important to note that coming into Lebanon is a deeply traumatizing and frightening experience for the Israeli soldiers who are accustomed to throwing bombs from the safety of the airspace. But on the ground battle, on the ground confrontation with real fighters who are fighting for their land, for their country, for their people, they don't stand much of a chance. And to the point of pushing for a ceasefire or for a truce or for the Biden administration having any kind of red line. We saw exactly what happened in Gaza over the past 11 months. The Biden administration was repeatedly saying that Rafah was a red line, that a ground invasion into Gaza was a red line, but the Israeli state...
Yeah, I mean, she's 100% correct. None of the red lines that the United States has put forward has actually been respected by Israel or followed up on by the United States.
There were absolutely no repercussions, no ramifications for any of the actions that the Israeli state was doing. And this is what compelled it to continue to escalate its massacres, its terror of the Palestinian people in Gaza, who to this day continue to endure daily massacres that are not being reported on as much as they were at the beginning of the war.
Lara Bitar, so if you could tell us a little bit more about how you think Hezbollah might respond to a possible invasion, and also explain UN Resolution 171701, because the UN Secretary General speaking Wednesday, he warned that Lebanon is at the brink, calling for an urgent ceasefire, but he also called for the implementation of UN Resolutions 1559 and 1701.
I can't really predict how Hezbollah will respond, but what we know is that so far Hezbollah has continuously tried to de-escalate. Hezbollah is not targeting civilians or civilian infrastructure. They have consistently aimed their weapons at military infrastructure and sites and soldiers. Even after the pager attack, the walkie-talkie attack, repeated campaigns on Dahye. Just a few minutes ago, before I joined you, Dahye was yet again bombarded by the Israelis. I think this is the 8th attack on the Lebanese capital. Despite all of this escalation from the Israeli side, Hezbollah remains restrained, continues to try to de-escalate, and the only ask here, which is not a really unreasonable ask, is for Israel to immediately end its war on the Palestinian people of Gaza after 11 months. As far as UN resolutions, for the most part, they're not legally binding. For the most part, they're not respected. The 1701 resolution...
Yeah, I mean, like, the UN has sanctioned and passed resolution after resolution condemning the actions of Israel over the course of decades, and doesn't mean diddly squat.
That was adopted after the 2006 war is habitually, if not daily, violated by the Israelis in a variety of different ways. That's why the majority of the Lebanese population is not holding its breath, waiting for a UN resolution or for the Security Council or even for the international community. I think not just the people in Lebanon, but people around the world have completely lost faith in the...
Oh, the Kana massacre took place in the 90s while Israel was occupying southern Lebanon. The IDF fired artillery shells into a UN compound where civilians were sheltering. And killed over 100 of them.
So-called international order, the rule of law. So right now, we can only expect things to get significantly worse, so long as the international community does not take any action to halt the insanity and the barbarism of the.
And the worst part about this is, like, she's right. Lara Bitar is right. Like, if the international community just sits back and doesn't do enough. But you know what? The awful thing is, the international community is just going to sit back. And unless Iran gets involved, in which case, like, the United States will likely get involved, and, like, it's even worse. So, like, there's not... I started this by saying there's not really a mechanism to de-escalate here. And I'm terrified of where this is going to go, because there are no brakes on this. There are no brakes.
Israeli state, so long as the Western world continues to supply the Israelis with weapons, with support, with diplomatic cover, we have very little chance of seeing an end to these to this campaign anytime soon. But on the other hand, what people can do, people anywhere can boycott Israel, can put pressure on their institutions, on their universities, on the corporations in which they work in, to divest from Israel. The only chance that we have is for the for the world and for comrades around the world to put this kind of pressure on their governments and on their institutions to isolate.
If the U.S. completely unplugs all support, Israel would be fucked. They would have the material to be able to continue waging war for a while, I would imagine. But, like, there are things we give them that they cannot manufacture themselves. You know? It would be very difficult for them, for example, to keep up the Iron Dome. It would be very difficult for them to continue replenishing these supplies of, you know, 1,000-pound bombs. So, on a material level, they would be in trouble. You know, maybe not immediately, but soon. And additionally, if the United States pulled our military support, as in, like, aircraft carriers and support services that we provide them, like intelligence services and such, that would severely hamper their operations. It would also change their geopolitical position. Iran. Iran would then be far more free to make retaliatory attacks on Israel. So again, in another material sense, that would be another possibility. And this is just your hypothetical of all support. You know, the carrier group moves out of the region. We stop sending arms and ammunition. We stop providing intelligence services. But diplomatically as well, the United States could organize like a sanction movement of Israel. We have the political and geopolitical clout to do that. I don't know. There are a lot of different things that could happen as a result of that. But more than just rescinding all of our support, we could actively put pressure on them. You know, via sanctions, via diplomacy, via, like, arms embargo. We could stop blocking the UN with our veto. Yep. We could stop doing a lot of things. There's a lot that could be done to increase the pressure on Israel to come to a ceasefire. The only solution is getting rid of Hamas. Well, unfortunately, Rivalry, they've been occupying Gaza for a year now. Hamas is still there. Hamas is an idea. You have to negotiate. You have to meet an idea with better ideas. And better ideas are not, we continue killing you until you're all dead. So, like, part of the problem here is you can't defeat an idea when your means of trying to kill that idea just creates more people with that idea. You know? Like, even if you killed every self-identifying member of Hamas, I'm willing to bet that the people who loved the people who got killed would probably have a lot of hostility towards the state of Israel and would simply reinvent that idea on their own. You know? So, like, part of the problem here is that it is a war goal that is unobtainable for Israel, regardless of how many people they kill. Well, and yeah, Rivalry, I agree. I think the best way forward would have been a two-state solution. The main problem here is that Israel and all of the powers that be in Israel oppose a two-state solution. Benjamin Netanyahu has bragged repeatedly about his ability to destroy a two-state solution. Hamas was fostered by Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party specifically to preclude a two-state solution. And so we are in a position where, like, that would be a great way forward, but the main power in the region doesn't want that. That's including us. It does include us. If the United States was willing to apply pressure, we could get a two-state solution. Trump was an idea. We kind of saw where that went. Yeah, he lost. Am I the only one that notices the irony of Israel invoking the Holocaust while they attack Lebanon, since the Lebanese are descendants of the Phoenicians? I don't really know what the significance of them being descended from the Phoenicians is. So... Alan Smith, I would love that if that were true. I would love that if Kamala Harris got elected, she reversed U.S. foreign policy and got a two-state solution done. I would love that. But I don't think that's going to be what happens. But I would love that. We have, I have to be honest, we do not have an actual accurate idea of what Kamala Harris would do if she got into office regarding foreign policy. Is it at least possible? I mean, it's possible. Is it likely? No, but it is possible. Regardless, what we can do remains the same: protest and apply pressure. Exactly, Hero. Fundamentally, Kamala Harris represents a better opportunity for change in U.S. foreign policy, but that change still needs to be fought for.
isolate Israel, because Israel will only stop this campaign and this war around the region if it becomes too costly for it. And right now, it's not paying any kind of price for its actions.
As we wrap up, Lara Bitar, there is a protest that is approaching the United Nations now, especially people protesting what's happening in Gaza.
Amy Goodman is the best of us.
You have Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, who delayed his trip by a day. He was supposed to address the UN General Assembly today. He's going to do it tomorrow. What do you expect him to say? And in the U.S. media on television, they're saying that Blinken has been desperately, rallying countries on the sidelines to get this 21-day ceasefire that the U.S., France, Canada, Australia, Japan, Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia are now calling for. But you have The Guardian reporting that, in fact, an effort by France and Britain to secure a joint statement by the UN Security Council calling for a ceasefire is stalled in the face of U.S. objections. Your final thoughts, Lara.
At the risk of repeating myself, I don't see, or we, for the most part, don't really believe anything that's coming out of the Biden administration.
I think at this point, this is the only rational way to respond to the Biden administration's constant lip service to peace. That it is mere lip service. There is no action being taken.
Neither its White House spokespeople or Blinken and others who are representing the U.S. And again, we have seen these maneuvers and this manipulation of public opinion, manipulation of the press for 11 months. They are not serious about a ceasefire, neither in Gaza nor in Lebanon, regardless of what they're saying, regardless of what narrative they're trying to sell us. We're simply not buying it.
Lara Bitar, I want to thank you for being with us. Editor-in-Chief of the Public Source, a Beirut-based independent media organization, speaking to us from Lebanon.
Oh, my God. This is a lot. The Phoenicians were genocided by the Roman Republic, and they were Semitic, some of the first victims of anti-Semitism. Oh, Carthage! Carthage! Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, I wasn't connecting those ideas together. Now, there is one ray of light here, and that is Bernie Sanders. As usual, Bernie Sanders. Sanders has officially introduced a resolution to force a Senate vote to block U.S. arms sales to Israel. Now, I will say that this is likely to fail, but it ramp up and increase political pressure in Congress. Introduced the joint resolutions of disapproval to block a $20 billion weapons transfer to Israel, which has violated U.S. and international law. So if you haven't been keeping up with this, basically, Anthony Blinken lied in order to continue sending arms to Israel. Basically, let's see here. What part of this is it? Yeah, U.S. law requires the government to stop arms shipments to countries that prevent the delivery of U.S.-backed aid. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken ignored the findings by groups like USAID, and told Congress Israel was not restricting humanitarian assistance, helping to keep weapons flowing to the Israeli military to continue its assault on Gaza. Which, remember, we talked about this already. Shouldn't he be impeached for that? Yes. He absolutely should. In a just world, he would be. But he's probably not going to be. And yeah, he lied about Israel doing collective punishment, about Israel blocking aid trucks getting into Gaza. And he lied about that specifically to continue the violence that is washing across the region. It is actually insane the amount of incompetence, of maliciousness, of outright evil being perpetuated here by people who, like Anthony Blinken, doesn't need to be doing this. He doesn't need to go and lie to Congress. But he's going out of his way to do that. And for the life of me, I don't think I can understand why. I don't think I can understand why. It just is... It's pathetic, and it breaks my heart. Democratic Senators Jeff Merkley and Peter Welch joined Bernie Sanders in sponsoring the joint resolution of disapproval, which Sanders described as essentially the only tool that Congress has to block American weapon transfers that don't follow U.S. and international law. The Pentagon notified Congress last month of 5 possible foreign military sales to Israel, totaling more than $20 billion. A record-breaking series of potential arms transfers to a country that for almost a year now has used U.S. weapons to pummel Gaza and the Palestinian people in response to a deadly attack by Hamas. The Israeli military has also blocked most humanitarian aid from entering the territory and has significantly escalated attacks in the occupied West Bank and neighboring Lebanon. Quote, Israel clearly had the right to respond to Hamas's horrific terrorist attack on October 7th, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's extremist government has not simply waged war against Hamas, he has waged all-out war against the Palestinian people. Netanyahu has bombed hospitals and schools, starved children, destroyed infrastructure and housing stock, and made life unlivable in Gaza. The United States must end its complicity in this atrocity. One of the only politicians we have to actually give a damn. The resolution's fact sheet lays out some of the specific instances where Israel used U.S. weapons, particularly JDAMs and 120mm tank rounds, to indiscriminately bomb Palestinians in violation of the 1961 Foreign Assistance Act, the Arms Export Control Act, the Conventional Arms Transfer Policy, and international humanitarian law. Yeah, it turns out firing 120mm rounds into civilian crowds is not great under law. The weapons transfer would also violate one of the Biden administration's own policies, the National Security Memorandum 20, or NSM 20, which required the State Department and Pentagon to investigate whether countries like Israel that receive U.S. military assistance are using it to break international law, which Israel is. Despite 2 government bodies concluding that Israel intentionally blocked aid to Gaza, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken rejected their findings in his May report, avoiding having to cut weapon shipments to the country as required by law. The White House did not immediately respond to HuffPost's request for comment, though Israel announced on Thursday it just received an $8.7 billion military package from the U.S. Because we live in hell world. So we have to continue building power, guys. If you haven't woken up yet, this should be your wake-up call. This is why we need a stronger left movement. It's not just so that we have democracy in the workplace. It's not just so that we have better healthcare in America. It's not just so that we can ensure the elderly have dignity at the end of their lives. It is so that we can also save the lives of other people around the world from the senseless violence that we currently enact, the senseless genocides that we currently are complicit with. But let this wake you up not just to an awareness of the world, but to action. Go out there, get involved in the political process, get involved in volunteering for political campaigns, learn the machinery of our government so that one day we can take those levers of power and use them for the greater good of all. Do you think Joe Biden is truly evil or is demented? I think it can be a little bit of both. I think that it can be that, one, he's very old, and two, I think it can also be that on this particular issue, he is very much complicit in evil. Yeah. I think both things can be true. Yeah, learn your local politics, and because I've said this story before, but if you can get onto your local city or town council, if you can get into a position in your local government, you can literally be the difference between life and death for people in your community. There was a suburb of Chicago. I believe it was a suburb of Chicago. We covered this story a few years ago, where it was wintertime. And it was getting below freezing in the winter. That's a temperature at which people start dying outside of exposure. And by one vote on the local city council, the community centers were allowed to, or the senior centers, after hours, were allowed to open their doors to the homeless in the community. And that decision, which was opposed, meant the difference between life or death for like dozens of people in that community. This one? Yeah. Like, even on a local level, and we do have to start local and work our way up from there so we know how things work. But you can make the difference.
We're talking about people's lives here. And you know what? If I have to lose some votes...
It was in Massachusetts, by the way, not Chicago.
...to save some lives, then I will do so.
Okay. Fighting back and for the homeless. This tense exchange you just heard took place during a recent city council meeting in Revere. Now, concerns were raised about using a senior center as a warming center for those without a home. The idea has been met with mixed reaction. NBC 10's Bianca Beltran joining us live in Revere with the controversy that has the North Shore town talking tonight. Bianca.
Well, Priscilla, this senior center is Revere's emergency center. It's designated for that use, and in the past, they have opened its doors when there are severe storms or when temperatures drop dangerously low. But what's new this year is the city is planning to make the second floor available overnight from January 14th through March 31st for anyone in need of a place to get out of the cold.
People are going to die in the street, and if you're going to look at them in the face and say you're okay with that, then be so. But you know what? I'm not. I'm not okay with burying people because it's 15 degrees out.
All right. Thank you. Emotions ran high at the Revere City Council meeting this week as seniors questioned plans to open the second floor of the senior center overnight to people seeking refuge from cold weather.
Here, this might be a better one. Better clip.
Because you want to know what? People are going to die in the street, and if you're going to look at them in the face and say you're okay with that, then be so. But you know what? I'm not. I'm not okay with burying people because it's 15 degrees out.
That fiery exchange getting a lot of...
God damn it. I want the actual clip. But you know what? I think my point is made. It's we need to be we need to wake up. We need to wake up and actually get to work. That's really all I got. When I see these insurmountable problems, what I think is we need more people running for local office. We need more people working our way up the ramps of political power. And Bernie Sanders had to be in politics for 40 years before he got to a point where he could do stuff. But that stuff on a national stage, I mean, an international stage even. But that 40 years was not fruitless. I guarantee you, Bernie Sanders made the difference between people living and dying in his communities. And you can do the same. Any one of us can do the same. We need like 40 more AOCs and Ilhans. And you know what? There are millions of us. There are millions of people who believe the same things that they do. I think we can find 40. Genuinely. We did do some crazy hard work getting Judge Janet elected here in Wisconsin, including you. Yeah, we did. This community turned out, and you know what? I want to be. I want us to turn out more and more and more as we go forward. Mr. Malachite, do you have a link handy for the to get people signed up for phone banking with PV? I should have it. I just don't have it handy. You barely need a shirt for local politics. You really do barely need a shirt. You can just be some guy. Get out there. What are you waiting for? Yeah, honestly, Alexa Crab, I relate to that. I've been live for 7 hours. I've been on that grind today. Here we go. If you want a phone bank with Progressive Victory tomorrow, here's a link for you. If you want to go and try and make a difference in races across the country to elect more progressive-leaning candidates, that's the link for you, okay? Go. Click that link. You can use your time tomorrow if you have some time off to phone bank for progressive candidates. Get out there. We're going to make a difference in swing states, okay, folks? Calling Montana to contact inactive registered voters to get out the vote for John Tester. Yeah, we need to get out the vote for John Tester, guys. John Tester's was down last I checked by about 3%. And his opponent is a literal monster. Yeah, Tim Sheehy. We covered him like last week when he was caught on camera repeatedly making comments about how Native Americans are all drunks. How indigenous people are all drunk dregs of society. Yeah, he's disgusting. So click that link, go volunteer. Get out the vote. Let's beat Tim Sheehy. His name is Tim Sheehy. Sheehy. John Tester's not great, but we only got 2 options. So, and it's Montana, so we take what we can get, okay? Yeah, Tim pronouns. Exactly. You got it. You understood the assignment.
Fucking pronouns!